Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us to our 2025-2026 HB 1416 Racial Waiver List webinar. We are glad that you have joined us. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Alicia Garcia. I'm the Texas Tutoring and Content Specialist for TEA, and I will be working with you as you start submitting your applications for the Racial Waiver List. I am joined by our team's director, and he'll introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Colby Self. I'm the Director of Texas Tutoring Supports, and I'm here. You'll hear mostly from Alicia today, but I'll talk about a few of the points for the process today.
So we're so glad you're here, and just know that at the end of the session, we may have time for you to ask a few questions, but otherwise we'll give you our email address where you can also submit questions. So for today's webinar, we are going to start off by looking briefly at the HB 1416 Racial Waiver List overview, and then I'll go over some of the vendor requirements, as well as going through the application and the application guide that we've provided for you. We will also discuss the product evaluation criteria, the timeline, and then the office hours that we'll have available for you later. And I think it's next week. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box so that we may capture some of your questions in case we don't have time to reply during this webinar. A recording of this webinar will be available on our HB 1416 Racial Waiver List. Colby will drop the link in the chat in case you don't have it. And we'll be referring back to this link as well, just so that you know that we have information available to you on that specific web page. So I'll get us started. I'll start by giving you a brief overview of the HB 1416 Racial Waiver List. Texas law requires that students who do not perform well on a STAR administration receive accelerated instruction. School systems can provide this instruction by assigning a TIA designated teacher for the applicable content area, or students can receive 15 hours of supplemental instruction. 15 to 30 hours of supplemental instruction, depending on which category they fall in. If they are in the high does not meet category, then the student receives 15 hours. If the student is in the low does not meet category, or has a consecutive school year failure, or the student failed a grade 3 reading or math assessment, then these students are required to receive 30 hours of supplemental instruction. So HB 1416 provides that TEA approves a product that uses an automated, computerized, or other augmented method to provide individual or group instruction. To provide individual instruction in lieu of having a student receive individual or group instruction. The agency will approve products only if the product provides evidence that indicates that the product is more effective than the individual or group instruction that is provided by a tutor. School systems can still choose to use any curricular tool that aligns with HB 1416 requirements to continue to support the accelerated instruction. However, only products that are approved on the racial waiver list qualify for the waiver of the 4:1 student to teacher ratio. So the definition of an HB 1416 racial waiver list product is that the product uses an automated, computerized, or other augmented method for providing the accelerated instruction. These products do not require a live in-person or tutor to provide the direct instruction. Products that are approved on the HB 1416 racial waiver list qualify for the waiver of 4:1 student to teacher ratio. So again, there is no need to have a tutor present, whether it's in person or virtual. The product takes care of all the components that a tutor would provide. So we have included on our webpage the announcement that tells you when the window opened, which was October 14th, and when the window will close, which is December 6th. And Kobe will drop the link in the chat for you as well, or he has already dropped it for you, but you can always refer back to this webpage. We have different sources for you, and also it gives you the instructions on how to request an application if you are interested in applying for the HB 1416 racial waiver list. So again, if you are interested, you must reach out to the tutoring team using the email that's provided on this webpage, and we'll also drop the email toward the end of this presentation. So here are the vendor requirements, and Kobe will drop the link on the chat as well. We have vendor requirements for you. Failure to comply with the stated requirements in these terms, conditions, and affirmations will result in automatic removal from the TA HB 1416 racial waiver list. So I'm just going to provide you with a brief overview of what these requirements are. Let me see if I have a screenshot on the next page. No, I do not. Okay. So for products that are approved on the racial waiver list, the renewal process to remain on the list consists of having a STAR outcome study at the end of the 25-26 school year after the STAR data is available. And depending on the outcomes of the study, this will help a product remain on the racial waiver list. Another thing that I'd like to point out is that vendors must meet and maintain compliance with the SBOE suitability rubric. And Kobe will definitely drop the link in the chat as well. Supplemental math materials must also successfully undergo the EMRA process during the EMRA 2025 cycle, which begins in May of 2025, to remain on the racial waiver list for the 2026-2027 school year. So if you make the list, you will be on the list for the 25-26 school year, but you are required to go through the EMRA process if you are a math supplemental product. Supplemental math materials must qualify under the EMRA criteria, or they will be removed from the HB 1416 racial waiver list. So again, failure to comply with the stated requirements in these terms, conditions, and affirmations will result in the automatic removal from the TEA HB 1416 racial waiver list. So again, these requirements are that vendors must abide by if they are approved to be part of the HB 1416 racial waiver list. Sorry. Now we're going to go over the racial waiver list application and the guide. So I'd like to clarify that, and Kobe will drop the link on the chat for you. When you first go on to the application link that's provided to you, once you request that to us via email, you're going to just see the initial questions that are just basic information questions about your company and your product, right? The rest of the questions are displayed based on the responses provided. So if a vendor's response indicates that your product does not meet HB 1416 racial waiver list criteria, the application will automatically notify you. So this serves as two things. One, it'll let you know ahead of time, thank you for your interest, but you don't meet the criteria. And so it keeps you from having to complete the application, knowing upfront that you won't qualify. Or two, it reminds you that, hey, you want to go back and you may want to go back and change your answer and then adjust it. So again, and we're not asking you to change, in other words, because you're changing your product. We're just wanting to make sure that you're accurately providing the information that's being asked of you. So again, the application will let you know whether or not you qualify. So if your response is the appropriate response, you'll continue to see the next question. If your response is not the proper response, then the application will tell you, thank you for your interest, but you're not meeting the criteria. So again, it's ensuring that you are providing the accurate response so that we can look at your product more closely. Kobe, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, there's no questions in the chat. But Alicia, could you clarify, are they submitting an application for each individual product? In each
Yes. Yeah,
this?
and we're gonna get to that in
Okay.
next few slides.
That's probably a question that's coming up.
It is. Yes, we're gonna cover that. Thank you, Kobe. So the link to this application guide is the same link. But when you are completing your application, please ensure that the links that you're providing to us as part of your responses are accurate and functional. Links that are not accurate, which is that they lead to a page where it is not clear what it is that you're wanting to share, or if you have a link that does not work, which means the link is broken or it leads to an error message, this can keep a product from being approved, or this can cause a delay in the review of the products. So please make sure that the links that you are providing are functional and accurate. Also, Linked documents with screenshots should be no more than 1 page. So please ensure that when you are providing a screenshot, you are definitely giving us what you're wanting us to look at. We don't need anything extra. We want to make sure that when the team is reviewing your product, that we are looking at exactly what you're wanting us to look. If it takes the review team more than 10 seconds or multiple clicks to access the content, then that specific content will be considered non-existent. So again, we may have a larger number of products to review, and we do have a timeline that we want to honor. And so it's important that you provide us with the accurate information. And I also want to clarify that we do not want demo accounts. So please do not submit demo accounts. Just please provide us with your responses, with your links to whatever evidence you're providing. And if you're providing a screenshot, that it's no more than 1 page.
Alicia, JC has a question. Can the application be partially filled out, saved, and completed at a later time?
I don't think Smartsheet allows you to do that. So I would suggest that, we gave you a hard copy of the entire application, that you get together with your team, that you work on answering all the questions. And then once you have all the responses gathered, then you can submit the entire application. But I will double check. I did play with Smartsheet several times, and that's one thing I did not do. So if you give us your email address in the chat, I can get back with you. I'll double check to see if Smartsheet has the capability of doing that. And so here is the application guide, and I'm only going to go over some of the important parts, not the entire thing. But first, I wanted to point out that Smartsheet does not accept embedded hyperlinks. So you must submit the full URL if you're linking your evidence to a document. Smartsheet also has a 4,000 character limit. This includes spaces and punctuation, so please keep that in mind. Vendors can submit more than 2 studies. Vendors cannot submit more than 2 studies. So you can only submit 2 studies, and each of them must have been conducted or completed within the last 8 years. So again, you cannot submit more than 2 studies. So make sure that when you're looking at what research you want to submit, that you're giving us the best you have, because we're only going to look at 2. And again, each of them must have been conducted within the last 8 years. Vendors can apply for multiple subjects and grade bands. So we've divided our applications into 3 different grade bands. We have the elementary grade band, which covers grades 3, 4, and 5. We have the middle school grade band, which covers grades 6, 7, and 8. And we have the high school grade band, which covers grades 9, 10, and 11. So again, you can apply for multiple subjects and grade bands. However, each submission is limited to 1 subject and 1 grade band. So depending on what you're wanting to approve your product for, you may have to submit more than 1 application. Additionally, the research should show efficacy for that specific grade band that you've selected. So again, I want to clarify or add that the research that you're submitting should show efficacy for that specific grade band. So for example, if you have research that covers, let's say grades 3 through 7, you may submit that same research for both grade bands, but again, it has to directly tie to the grade band that you're submitting the application for. Products on the ratio waiver list are intended for supplemental instruction. So please, submissions should not include tier 1 instructional materials. So again, make sure that your product fits for supplemental instruction. Products on the ratio waiver list should provide at least 90% text coverage and working towards 90% ELPS coverage for all of the selected grade bands. The product should also provide resources for emergent bilingual students and include an authentic Spanish component where applicable. And lastly, the product should have current presence in school systems in Texas. Vendors, please ensure that the research you have submitted indicates that your product is more effective than individual or group instruction provided by a tutor. And again, this is key. This is what's going to, that can keep you from being on the ratio waiver list. We need to make sure that whatever you provide us is the best research you have available that gives us evidence that your product is just as effective as having a tutor present. TEA also, in the end, prioritizes products who receive the highest scores in the student independence block and in the research block when determining if a product meets criteria for commissioner approval. And most importantly, final approval is at the discretion of the commission. Kobe, do we have any questions thus far?
Yes, just a reminder, there's questions coming through the chat. I'm not going to answer those. So if you'll put them in the Q&A at the bottom, that way we can track what questions are being asked. They're coming through the chat. Q&A is at the bottom. If you click on that, it's better for us to keep track of the questions. First question, if we have more than one type of report, should we link the multiple different one-page documents, one per report type? I think that's Camlin is asking that. Camlin, do you want to ask that a different way? Are you talking about examples of different reports or different formats of the same report? Can you specify that a little further? I don't know if you could come off mute.
Sure, sorry about that. Yes, if we have multiple different types of reports, like for example, in the progress monitoring where you're asking for how do you show progress monitoring, the one-page documents, if we have ones that show the report and also have explanations of what the report is or does, and if that document goes over a page, is that going to be automatically disqualified?
I'm going to say no, as long as you're being very concise. You know what I mean? Like if what you're providing is specifically tied to what's being asked, then I would say no, but I would definitely not go over, we don't want 5 or 10 pages. But what I'm saying is, like, if your response is still directly linked to what you're trying to show us, then that's okay if you go over by 1 page, but I wouldn't go more than 2. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm. We're just trying to make sure that when we're getting responses, they're not vague, just direct and to the point. And so that, of course, we want to give you a fair chance to explain what you're trying to show us. But at the same time, we're wanting to just keep it very focused. We want to keep your responses focused. We want to keep your evidence focused and everything that you're providing very focused, just to make sure that we're not getting lost in the responses that you're providing.
Okay, another question is, do the results need to be disaggregated by the individual grade or just the grade band? So for the results by grade or by the grade band, the biggest thing is that the research submitted reflects either the grade or the grade band to align with the efficacy results. As an example, we had a product submitted that was a primary grade level, say kinder first. Well, it wouldn't be it had kinder first, second grade research, but obviously for ratio waiver list, we're looking for fourth, fifth grade products. Those were not aligned. So the research was not aligned with the products that were submitted. So obviously there's not efficacy shown because there's misalignment between the grade bands of what the research was conducted and the products submitted. So, being concise with the research. So if your research does include broader grade levels, point to where that specific grade band is outcomes or efficacy is outlined in the research. That will help our researchers align and have that conciseness. So if you're pointing to a fourth grade product that was part of a larger research study of multiple grade levels, we are interested in seeing how that fourth grade product and the outcomes of the efficacy study for that specific product, if that makes sense. We need to have alignment. There needs to be alignment connected to the research of that product. So again, if you're producing a middle school product for review, but you have primary research on a primary grade product, those are not aligned, so that we would have problems seeing the efficacy of that product. Is it acceptable, Alicia, to submit a PDF of contents to show TEKS coverage?
Yes.
We've had some crosswalk documents submitted or TEKS alignment documents submitted before. I think those have been accessible with that. Is there a benchmark the product must exceed to show it is more effective than live tutoring?
We're going to go through the rubric,
Yeah.
and I think we're going to touch on that.
The final score on the resource is a 1 through 4 score. How is the score determined given the Y and N and high, medium, low scores on the research rubric? And are those scores weighted in any way?
And Kobe, we can also continue to discuss that when we get to the rubric. So thank you for your questions. We are going to get to the rubric component. So I think once we discuss that, we'll be able to address some of your questions then.
And then also the efficacy study is not available is that an automatic disqualifier. So Josh, you'll see the importance of that in the rubric coming up. If those components aren't available, it's going to be very difficult to achieve a lower tier score, which is a desirable score on the rubric itself. So we'll get to that. If not, definitely we'll be able to follow up with you on a specific question you may have. All right, Alicia, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kobe. And these are great questions, so keep asking. So now I'm going to talk about the product evaluation criteria, and I think this is where we're going to get to the questions that were just surfaced. The evaluation is a two-part process. The first part, which the rubric reflects which part belongs to TEA, that's completed by TEA. And during the first part, we're just verifying that the vendor attended the webinar, or the vendor's attesting that, yes, I watched the webinar at a different time, and that you've read the application guide. And this is just to ensure that all vendors are understanding what it is that we're looking for. Just to ensure that one, does your product fit the criteria? And then two, are you providing what we're asking for? So that's why we're ensuring that vendors are fully aware of what it is we're looking for. Then we're also verifying that there's product alignment with any statutory or strategic focus areas. We're also looking for text alignment for each applicable subject and grade level. We are also ensuring that your product has the emergent bilingual resources that our students need. And lastly, we're also looking to make sure that you have provided evidence that the product is more effective than individual or group instruction. And so we're just verifying all this. We say, yes, if your product meets this initial criteria, then our third-party reviewer, which is Texas Tech University, they are the ones that will continue to review the second part of the rubric. During their review, they're looking at the progress monitoring tools. They're also looking at whether or not you're providing effective tools that support student independence. These tools are categorized as high level, medium level, or low level of supports in the area. They also look at your recommended research-based usage metrics for your product, and they will be categorized as strong, moderate, or having weak or no evidence. And we're going to look at the research studies that you've provided that prove product efficacy. And then these studies will be categorized as strong, moderate, or providing weak to no evidence. And lastly, the team will evaluate the evidence that indicates that your product is more effective than individual or group instruction. And I'm going to go more in depth on these next slides. So the first key component that we're going to look at is the student independence section. This section assesses whether the product support effectively replicates the guidance and assistance that a tutor would provide. So again, to us, this is extremely important because we're telling school systems this product can provide as effective instruction as a live, in-person, or virtual tutor. And so this is why we use these categories. We're going to categorize your product as high support, medium support, or low support for the student independence piece. And again, this is very important. This is what's going to allow us to tell school systems, yes, this product is just as effective as individual or group instruction provided by a tutor. The next piece, the sections on student usage targets and product efficacy across populations and grade levels assess whether the vendor has provided robust research evidence demonstrating the product's effectiveness. So that's why it's important that you give us this research, the best that you have, because then the team will categorize the evidence as being strong, moderate, or that you provided some evidence, or weak to no evidence. And so your goal is to try to get to the strong evidence mark. And these are the different definitions that we've provided for you to help you, to guide you in selecting what research you want to submit. And then Kobe, I'll let you talk to this one.
Thanks, Alicia. So looking at the strong evidence of the research, the tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, again, looking at what is evident based on the research is a key factor we look at. What did you submit as your research, and how does it stand up with that? Again, there are some limitations to the research that we did put in place this year based on some discussions we had and some observations. Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong, it is limited to having occurred within the last 8 years. We did see some evidence of some older research that was submitted 10, sometimes older, 10 plus years, that wasn't really up to date. We also are looking at, prioritizing peer-reviewed research. There was research that was submitted that never was published or internally derived. We are looking for the peer-reviewed, and that'll be evident in the rubric, which you do see. Something I did want to point out is there is a difference in the tier 1 that we are giving a little bit of flexibility on the broad student involvement, inclusive of 350 plus students. So that is still relevant in the rubric, and you will see that here shortly, from 5 plus school districts across Texas. We are giving some allowability with this because we understand in research studies that there is sometimes need to be some anonymity given to where the research is conducted. So sometimes your research studies may say in southern states or in a southern region. We're going to look more for similar demographics to what you may see in Texas as being allowable to give credit for that as well. We understand that sometimes you're not going to be specific and say school districts in Texas specifically, but in a southern region. So we will consider similar demographics to Texas as part of the research study to allow that to be an indicator in the rubric as a yes where possible. So just keep that in mind. That is a difference for tier 1 here and in the rubric. And that was a consideration last time as well. We did have allowability for that too, once we realized some of the research studies did have that as part of their statement of the methodology as well. So tier 1, super strong evidence. What's experimental design, statistical significance, and these are outlined more so in the rubric, which we'll dig in here in just a minute. The diverse student impact, in-depth feature analysis, implementation fidelity, reliability, and attrition, and clear usage context. And these are founded in the research methodology and how that ties together. Another component we did identify is who's selecting and submitting the research for you. So ensure that you collaborate amongst yourself as a team and you have somebody that is knowledgeable of the research conducted and is selecting the 2 research pieces that reflect your product at the highest level of rigor and show the strongest evidence for that. There sometimes can be a disconnect if you're asking a person that has sales material is different sometimes from the research material being submitted, and those can sometimes not align to what you're trying to convey here. Again, we are asking researchers in the education field to look at the research, so they do have research best practices in a research mind. They're going to evaluate this through that lens. They're not looking at it from what you may have as sales material. So they can be 2 different things, and they may have some in the same when you're providing the research. So keep that in mind when you're submitting your research examples to meet the criteria you're wanting to achieve here on that end. Alicia, I'll kick it back to you for that.
All right, thank you, Kobe. All right, so I'm going to go through the timeline, and we may have to come back to the actual rubric itself. We didn't include like a screenshot of it, but we can go through it at the end, toward the end of the presentation. So here we have a timeline of what we're anticipating will happen. So your submission window is now open. You have through December 6th to submit your application. After that, we will start reviewing your product, and then we will hand it over to Texas Tech University, who will also be looking at what you've submitted. In the spring of 2025, TEA will notify vendors of the review outcomes, including next steps for those who are approved. And also we will have the HB 1416 racial waiver list for the 25-26 school year finalized, and we will announce that on our webpage. For those who are approved, we are expecting you to become to participate in the EMRA cycle for 2025, which will include a supplemental math product review. And right now we anticipate that starting May 2025. We anticipate having the supplemental math product review complete in November of 2025. And we will start this process all over again in the fall of 2025 for the 26-27 school year. Some products will be renewing and some products will be submitted for initial review. So that's what we have. If you have any questions regarding EMRA, we did give you that link earlier. We are not part of that process, but we are having that as a requirement for you to continue on the HB 1416 racial waiver list if you are providing a math supplemental product. Kobe, do you have anything to add to this specific timeline? Okay.
No, I just want to reiterate, we won't have specific answers to EMRA questions you may have. So please, if you are, again, they're starting with math supplemental products. If you do have a math supplemental product and have specific questions, our team is not able to answer those for you. Again, we're not leading the rubric approval scheduled for November, and that process will reside with that team. So they're the best to answer those questions for you. And I would just point to you to get that information from the resource provided, the links provided for you in that.
Sorry, screen changed. Okay. We will be offering office hours, and that will be next Wednesday at 11 a.m. So if you haven't registered, Kobe will drop the link for you on the chat, but that's also listed for you on the racial waiver list webpage. And again, it'll be next week at 11. If you'd like, we totally encourage you to please send us any questions you have ahead of time. There is the accelerated instruction email address, and like that, we can have that posted, or we can include that as part of our office hours, and we can provide you with the response at that time. Otherwise, if you don't email it to us, that's fine. We can answer the question for you when you attend the office hours. But if you send us the question ahead of time, then we can make sure that we include that as part of our office hours. An additional resource that we encourage you to look at is at the What Works Clearinghouse Procedures and Standards Handbook version 5.0. Kobe would drop the link in the chat as well, but this is what we are basing the review on. This is the process that Texas Tech uses when looking at your research or the evidence you've provided for your product. All right, before we get your feedback, I think I'm gonna, since we do have time, Kobe, would you like me to share the rubric itself and go through it? Do you think that would be?
Yeah, let's show them the rubric, and we can kind of just show them, let them see the questions. It is available currently on the web page. All these documents are linked on that website. That's kind of the landing page. As you go through and you develop questions, that's why we have the office hours or the email. Feel free to send questions. If we don't have the answer for you today, we definitely can get back with you. Your wonderings on that, those questions as they come up for you and your team.
Okay, thank you. So this is the first section. This is the section that TEA reviews first. This is like a pre-screener. We want to make sure that your product meets just the basic requirements to be on the racial waiver list. So one prerequisite is that, again, you've attended the webinar, and if not, that you at least watch the recording, just to ensure that you have a better understanding of what we're looking for when you submit your application. We're also asking for you to attest that you've read through the vendor guide as well. We again created these to help you better understand the process of what we're looking for when you are submitting your application. These pieces, again, we're looking at just to ensure that, again, just the basic, like, first of all, it's important that you provide at least 30 hours of supplemental instruction, since most students require 15 to 30 hours. We're also looking to ensure that you have at least one weekly session of computerized instruction. We're looking for the 90% text coverage. We're also looking that you're providing the resources for our emergent bilingual students, and that you are currently present in Texas school systems. And lastly, that you're providing 1 to 2 peer-reviewed research documents that indicate that your product is more effective than individual or group instruction. Once we decide yes or no, we hand over the information you've provided to us to Texas Tech University, and they look at these components. And Kobe, feel free to jump in if you want to add when I go through these sections. Kobe is a bigger expert on this section than I am. So they're going to look at your progress monitoring. They're going to look at if you provide formative assessments and summative assessments. And also if your progress monitoring data is focused on 2 different types of audiences. Do you provide a progress monitoring report for teachers? And then do you provide one that's specifically for school administrators? Because they're each looking for something different, right? Teachers are looking at what students are doing on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, whereas administrators are looking at more of an overall picture of what's happening on their entire campus. We're also looking at how you're providing the monitoring records, the frequency, and then if you're looking at specific growth trends over specified time periods. This is the student independence component, as I said before, is very important. We're looking at how you adjust lessons to students when they are working on your product. How do you step in and provide the individualized support that students need? Are you adapting lessons based on the student data or based on how they're performing? And how are you providing feedback that supports the next steps for students? So that section is going to be categorized as providing a high level of support, a medium level of support, or a low level of support. And again, this is the piece that's going to tell us that your product can take the place of a tutor. Whether or not the student is working on this on campus, or if the student is working using your product remotely, which could be students are allowed to use this at home. Then we're going to look at the student usage targets. This first part, we're looking at whether or not you've provided usage recommendations for specific content areas and grade levels that are included. And this is just a yes, no, you've included this piece. But then the second part of this is going to look at the team is going to look at whether or not the study that you've submitted shows that product efficacy is demonstrated at a specific minimum dosage and for a specific grade level or subject area. So this is important for you to ensure that the research that you're providing aligns with the grade band that you've selected for your application. The team will look at this and then we'll just evaluate your research and then decide if it's considered strong evidence, moderate evidence, some evidence, or weak to no evidence. And lastly, they're going to look, when it comes to this evidence piece, they're going to look at whether or not your product is effective across multiple education settings. And we were talking about having a large group versus a small group, or having a rural setting and an urban setting, and whether or not that's present. And if this evidence, again, is strong, moderate, you have some evidence, or you have weak or no evidence. And they're also going to look at whether or not your product is effective in improving academic achievement for students with multiple characteristics. And we're looking at risk, emergent bilingual, and economically disadvantaged students, and whether or not that's present. And then this last piece, this is the piece where they're going to look at whether or not you've provided each component. And this is where you're going to be, in the end, tiered as a 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah, some questions that come up about this, just in the question, I'm going to do my best to answer this and not misspeak here. Peer reviewed mean by journal, or does it mean reviewed by evidence of ESSA qualified as peer reviewed? Peer reviewed can be along a continuum. So technically ESSA qualified can be peer reviewed, but does it always meet the quality standards that this rubric is assessing? The answer can be yes and no. It can be ESSA reviewed and meet a ESSA qualified rating, but may not meet the other criteria here. So it can technically be peer reviewed, and we've seen some peer reviewed research that is not quality research. It depends on what the level of quality of the peer review is. So keep that in mind. We're saying mostly peer reviewed means that you've had a third party look at it and say that there's been quality research conducted. It's been, the methodology is good. There's things that are there that we would expect that contribute to the quality research, as opposed to it's done in-house, it's done, we paid for this research to be conducted, and the outcomes, there may be certain biases in the outcomes because of that mechanism that's in place. So just keep that in mind. We want the strongest research to show the efficacy of the product in this case, and that's what we're looking at. Just know that qualifications are different and the scoring may not be the same that you receive from ESSA. The other question on this, and this is what I was going to report on the rubric. If you look down, I think it's on the last section, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The study sample is comprised of demographics similar to Texas public school students and includes 5 school districts and 350 plus students. So this is naming out. Originally we said mostly Texas, 5 districts in Texas. We are giving some flexibility with the research here because we do realize as you anonymize your research group, it may be southern states, it may be groups of states that are just anonymizing your data because of the number of students participating. So we're looking for a higher end value, so 350 plus in diverse districts or diverse representation of at least 5 school districts participating in the study. So we have a good representation across the sample of the study there on that. I think there was another question, it's since disappeared. In the research resources, is there a formula for the number of yeses and nos to equal tier 1, 2, 3, or 4? I'll just let you know, in order to get in tier 1, you're mostly going to have hit yeses in all these categories. I'll have to say most people, we did have to offer some flexibility on the demographics for the Texas study. Last go round, just to be transparent on that, we did allow some wiggle room with that because of how some of the research was structured, but most everyone on the ratio waiver list hit yes in the research, all the research components here. If you look at the study, use high quality design and implementation as experimental design. If you see if it's yes, you are going to get a yes for quasi-experimental and then correlational logic model. So it's kind of a nested. If you hit the highest research study, you're not going to have, obviously you're not going to hit the lower level research study. You're going to get the highest research level study is going to encompass those as well. So keep that in mind. Also, your best research is going to happen within the last 5 years. Any of you that have done research or dissertation writing, which I have in the last few years, you know that they really limit you to research that's conducted in the last 5 years. We said 8 years because we understand there may be some seminal research that you're basing your product on, and you may want to include that. But ideally, in the last 5 years is great, and that's going to be some better research to look at. But we will accept up to 8 years as in the guidelines. But anything that's happened in the last 5 years, we know COVID kind of threw some of the research for a loop. So it may, that's why we've expanded that to 8 years, because you may have some seminal research that may be foundational for your products efficacy you want to include, but you also get to include up to 2 research studies per product submitted. So that gives you some options there as well on that end. Alicia also says, does this mean studies must specifically have both urban and rural samples? I think it would behoove you to have diverse demographics in your studies to represent that, since that's what Texas represents. We have most of our students are in urban centers, and that's we do, but Texas is unique too. We have 5.5 million students. Mostly are in urban centers, but we do have we do serve rural populations as well. So I'm not going to tell you what to submit, but looking at that, if you have a representative sample, that can be beneficial as well. Can you add additional details around not providing demo accounts? The best way to submit our assessment is an interactive format is through the sample login. Amy, the issue with demo accounts is we're on a limited time frame to get in and find what we need. That's why the screenshots have been very valuable, highlighting what specifically needs to be looked at. If we're having to log in, a lot of times access is an issue. Knowing where to click, the technology gets hung up, or there's sometimes just issues have arisen with the demo accounts. It's very hard to get into. That's why we try to shy away, and we've said just no demo accounts. So if you can do screenshots is the best option. We really don't want to look at any demo accounts as part of this process. Unless Alicia, do you have any other perspective on that?
No, Kobe, you are correct. The demo counts can take a while, and there's no, we want to ensure accuracy. And so when we're navigating through your program, we may not get to where you're wanting, or we may not be able to look where you're wanting us to look. So screenshots really are the better option.
When you say 2 research studies per product, just confirming that is 2 research studies per submission. So if submit 1 product for 2 grade bands for the same content area, could have 4 different studies submitted across both submissions to ensure that the research matches the grade bands for that content area. So that would be for each application they fill out, they could have 2 research studies for that one. And then like if they have 2 math products, they submit for 1 math product, they could have 2 research studies. And then they're submitting another one, they could have 2 separate research studies that align with those grade bands, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That is exactly correct.
Good. Can you explain what evidence you would look like for implementation of an empirically based logic model? Lisa, I'm not evaluating that. So I would have to get back to you on that. Feel free to email us and I could probably dig more into that. Or if you want to bring that to an office hour, we could probably dig into that a little bit further. I don't have an answer for you on that. Josh has a question. If a product is approved and selected by a school district, can it only be used by the students required to receive instruction under this BH, or could it be used by all students at the campus?
So I'm going to zoom. If a product is on the ratio waiver list, it can be used by all students on the campus. You do not have to be a student who's requiring accelerated instruction under HB 1416 to use this product. You can use that. It's at the school system's discretion, to be honest. But what we're saying is a product that is on the list can meet HB 1416 requirements, and a product that's on this list does not require a tutor and does not require the 4-to-1 student to tutor ratio.
Right.
So while you're looking, Kobe, I'm gonna again
Sure.
repeat what I've said. So remember, school systems can select any product they want as long as it meets statutory criteria, right? But only the products that are on the racial waiver list remove the presence of the tutor and remove the 4-to-1 student to tutor ratio requirement. So again, school systems can choose to use another product as long as it meets supplemental instruction criteria, but they would still have to meet the 4-to-1 student to tutor ratio or secure the waiver for larger groups and also need the tutor, the live in-person or virtual tutor. So again, what the racial waiver list does is remove those different requirements. So I want to clarify, if you're not on the racial waiver list, school systems can still choose to use your product. They just have to meet other HB 1416 requirements.
And Scott asked, can you provide more information on how the presence of statistically significant findings is factored into the ratings? So if you look at the research sources, Scott, I'm going to give you my best interpretation here. It does say the study uses high quality, or I'm sorry, it's a little small. I'm trying to read it here. Third from the bottom, the study demonstrates statistically significant positive effects on the relevant outcomes. So it is a consideration on the research sources. We definitely want to ensure that there is a statistical significance, that it's not just happenstance that the use of the product does lead to positive outcomes. So it is a factor that is considered in the research sources as a yes or no factor in the strong evidence here. I don't know if that answers the question for you, but it is part of the rubric and a consideration. Something of note is going back to who submits the research and answers the question of understanding statistical significance and being able to select the studies that point to that. I think it's important that you collaborate with researchers or people that understand the statistics and know what statistical significance is, so you can point to that and prove out some of these. Again, I'm not a researcher by trade, but the individuals at Texas Tech are researchers, and they are going to look for if you provide a study and it is pointing to a statistical significance, as noted in the third component from the bottom, they're going to want to look for that and be able to see that. So just be sure that again, you're choosing studies that do prove out those points. Unfortunately, I think there's many great products out there that are used. We know that, but studies may have been submitted previously that did not show the efficacy needed that aligned with the rubric used in this case. So no matter how great products can be, not saying any specific product, and how well products have shown through other research, we are going to have to go based on what is provided in this submission at the time of the submission here on that end.
And Kobe's correct. We can only go by what you've submitted. So that's where we keep emphasizing, please submit the best you have available.
Alicia, another question, I think following up from Amy's question regarding items 33 and 35 in the rubric. Can you describe how to effectively show a reviewer an entire formative and summative assessment with screenshots that fit on one page?
You do not have to show an entire assessment. You just have to show us that there's presence. So you could give us a screenshot of one or even a couple that fit on one page, but we do not need to look at the entire assessment. So you could give us a screenshot of a portion of, like, let's say you're doing the elementary grade band, a screenshot of what grade 3 would look like, and just a portion of it, and then a screenshot of what a grade 4 assessment would look like. but we don't need to look at the entire assessment.
Okay, Camlin's flagged a broken link. We'll get that fixed right after this meeting. Apologize. We thought we had all those fixed and we've been working on that. So we'll get that fixed this afternoon. There are redundant links on that. It looks like it is product evaluation of effectiveness, the application preview document. And I think I dropped that in the chat. So let me see if I have that here. I can drop it for you. I think I have that here. I think it's in the application preview guide, but we'll fix it in that document as well. Apologize for that. Thought we had all those fixed, but apparently it's broken again. Camlin, click on that link in the chat, see if you can get to that. Sometimes those the links, we've had trouble with those not keeping when we upload the file for some reason. But feel free to email us if you find any of the links are broken. Again, that's a problem we thought we had resolved, but we'll get with our web designer and see what the issue is. But please take time. I know this hour was short to go through. Think about it. You need to talk with your team. If you have questions, we do have the office hours. The link is in the chat so you can get registered for those office hours, or if you have questions. As questions come up, feel free to shoot us an email so we can, best have an answer for you and anything comes up, and we can definitely help get you the answers you need. We definitely want the best submissions you have that best show your product in the best light possible for the reviewers and for us to evaluate for the ratio waiver list for this next school year coming up.
Right. So please, again, I encourage you to email us your questions. We're going to have office hours. You can include them. I will not tell people this company submitted this, this vendor submitted this question, or we're just post the question and share it with everyone with their response. But again, please send us your questions ahead of time, and we'll be sure to include them in our office hours, at least initially for our presentation, to make sure that we're addressing what questions you've asked. We definitely value feedback. So here is a QR code. If you have time, please let us know what we're doing well and what we need to improve on. We're always looking for feedback, and we look at it closely just so that we can make changes. For example, these additional resources we've provided for you, that again was based on some of the feedback we received last time when we went through this process this past spring. So thank you. We appreciate you attending this webinar. Again, reach out to us. We provided you the email address. Send us your questions, and we can definitely provide you with responses. And if Kobe and I do not know the answer to your question, we will reach out to our Texas Tech team. They're wonderful, amazing, and they're really good about providing us with the answers to our questions. All right, it is noon. Thank you again for joining, and we will see you next week during our office hours.